What do you think the biggest threat to the United States is right now?
I think it is the polarization in the country. And we've always had polarization in America. If you go back to the Jefferson-Adams presidential race in 1800, the things that were said in that election would fit right into a current political environment. But what's been different more recently is not just a measure of paralysis, as indicated by the debt ceiling, but a level of meanness and a lack of civility among our politicians. The sense that somebody who disagrees with you is not just somebody you disagree with, but is an enemy, is a bad person. This lack of civility is I think, something new and really is pretty pervasive in the Congress, and it sets a pretty bad example for the rest of the country.
When you think of the biggest challenges facing society today, political polarization might not be the first thing that comes to mind. In fact, many people don't even realize it's a major public issue. A quick Google search reveals the top 3 related questions. What is political polarization? Polarization definition. And political polarization definition. So, what exactly is it? And why, as we just heard, is former Defense Secretary Robert Gates warning us about its impact? Political polarization is the growing divide of political alignment and attitudes between the two prominent sides of our democracy, Democrat and Republican. I had the opportunity to get on a call with Eric Loeb, an associate professor in the Department of Politics, Government, and Law at the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater. Here is his explanation.
When you look at the average ideology of a Democrat and a Republican, 50 years ago, they were actually kind of blended, right? You had some Republicans that were more liberal than some Democrats and vice versa. And then kind of in the 70s and ever since then, those groups have been moving farther apart. So now the most liberal Republican you have is still more conservative than the most conservative Democrat, right? They used to be all mixed up. Now they've kind of separated into 2 groups. And so just on paper, leave out political parties, leave out Trump, leave out America. Just if you have 2 groups and the average location of the 2 groups is here versus the average location of the 2 groups is here, when they're far apart, it's just going to be harder to get anything done.
This growing divide can be attributed to multiple factors. One of the biggest is the media and the rise in partisan news outlets, as well as social media algorithms.
Any day of the week, right now, any media entity could say, Fox News could say, I want to dial back on all this Trump is awesome and Democrats suck rhetoric. Or someone on MSNBC could do the opposite. But they don't, right? Why don't they? Because they have an incentive, because we have a largely privatized media system. If you own a TV station, right, you want as many eyeballs on the screen as possible. If the media were going to try to change things up and try to address this, I struggle seeing why they would, because most networks have kind of figured out a formula that works for them, right? Again, Fox or MSNBC or whatever. So it's kind of a chicken or the egg thing, because if you and I and all the people watching TV, if we were to suddenly say, you know what, we're tired of this. We want to see civil discourse and fair and balanced coverage of things, and we're going to watch whatever channel does that. If we did that, if Americans did that, MSNBC thought they would switch by next week, right? They would completely revamp everything to get our eyeballs back, right? We're not doing that though, right? By the virtue of the fact that we keep watching our networks, and we're not watching things like C-SPAN or NPR or, whatever is out there that you might call less polarized. The fact that people are not flocking to those is telling the media, hey, our formula is working, right? We don't need to change anything. The consumer demand is not there for this.
In addition to this, if it bleeds, it leads rhetoric that makes up the majority of society's media diet. We now live under the influence of algorithms, silent curators that shape our perspective of the world. These algorithms don't just show what's trending. they contort themselves to align with our viewing habits. So if you're consistently watching a particular ideological news source without seeking out more balanced or objective perspectives, the algorithm begins to narrow your feed. It reinforces existing beliefs, filters out objective opinions, and gradually constructs a digital echo chamber. Over time, this doesn't just shape what we see, it shapes how we think. It polarizes, isolates, and ultimately divides. And the most alarming part, most of the time, we don't even realize it's happening. But why is this considered so bad?
I mean, the political scientist in me would say there's a lot of downsides to more polarization, right? The rejection of true information, for instance, right? Or an unwillingness to have good faith negotiations in a political system that really was built for that originally, right? The framers wanted that to happen, right? But even beyond the political science side, just as a human being, there are so many downsides to polarization. It is certainly the case that polarization can lead to less trust in the political system, even by virtue of, hey, my team lost the election, well, now I don't think that was a fair election, without any evidence, right? In 2020, that was just an election that he lost, right? Full up. And that sucks, and I am sure a lot of people feel bad and would prefer it otherwise. But people have lost elections throughout American history, including during civil wars and global wars, and nobody really, people said, "Oh, well, that sucks. Congratulations," right?
At the end of the day, there will always be polarization in our nation, and there is no clear one way of how to solve the issue. But it can start with you. When reading or watching the news, be objective and ask yourself if what you are seeing is objective reporting or if it has another intent. It can also be a matter of how we treat one another.
And you don't have to demonize people to disagree with them. You can say, my opponent has a different point of view. I totally disagree. I think that would be a terrible mistake, but I also believe that he or she also is trying to do what he or she thinks is best for America. Mm-hmm. It's pretty simple, actually. It's just treating each other with more civility and the reality that as Americans, we're all in this together. And it doesn't matter whether you're from a red state or a blue state. Whatever happens to the country happens to everybody.